happened in the first section of the inventory. If you could step back from what we do here and look at it objectively, it is a tremendous ego reduction. It is, matter of fact, it's the greatest vehicle for ego reduction, self-reduction, I think, that has ever been created. Here I am. What does the ego do best? It judges. And I've listed all my judgments in the resentment section. And in every single case, I've dismantled them by changing my perspective, looking at them from an entirely different angle to see how I was wrong. Isn't it odd? My first life story inventory, after I was done with that one, if you'd asked me what was the exact nature of your wrongs, I would have said, well, I stabbed a guy and I stole some money and I did all that stuff. If you'd asked me coming out of the one I did in the big book, I would have told you about how wrong I was about my mother and father, how wrong I was about my sister, how wrong I was about the women in my life, how wrong I was about the people in AA. Because one of the beautiful things about suffering from alcoholism in the fellowship of AA, by the time I did the first genuine inventory, I was sober over 4 years. So most of the names on my resentment list are people in AA. Right? And I had to see how wrong I was about you. It was really where I started to really get my first sense of community. As I started to see myself in you, and I started to even feel close to some of the people I built these pathetic, childish cases against. And now, we go to the section on fear. And I think fear is the deal. One of the things that was very clear in the resentment inventory is every single resentment, there was fear involved. Something was threatened. My pride, my pocketbook, my relationships, me getting my way, something was threatened, and there was some fear involved in every single resentment. So what do we do in fears? Well, we make a list. The book starts off by saying a couple things at the bottom of 67. It's interesting stuff. It says, notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. This short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. It's really true. It's the driving force. Fear is the muscle of the ego. You want to push me to be selfish? You want to push me to be controlling? You want to push me to be self-seeking? You want to push me into self-pity or manipulating others? Get me afraid. Scare me. You want to see me act badly? Scare me. Fear is the muscle of the ego. It's what drives me. The book says we're driven by 100 forms of it. It is the driving force. It's what controls you. And isn't that odd that it's the driving force in my life for all these years, and I don't even know it. I don't even know it. I don't know what drives me. Even though there were times I felt driven. There were times where I thought, especially when I did one of the things that came out of my first inventory, I didn't uncover that much, but I started to see these patterns. Like I'd done the same thing over and over again. I changed towns. I found the same stupid employer in the new town that I found in the old one. I changed relationships. I had just as much problems with the new one as I had with the old one. There was a pattern there. What's the common denominator? Me. Why am I doing this? Why do I keep putting myself in these places? What's driving me? to repeat the same things over and over and over and over again. Self-centered fear. In chapter 7 in the book, the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, in step 7, it says that self-centered fear is the chief activator of all my defects. It's the muscle of the ego. And so we're going to look at this evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. And this next line explains volumes of my life. It's talking about fear as fear sets in motion trains of circumstances which brought me misfortune I felt I didn't deserve. But did not I myself set the ball rolling? What does that mean? Psychiatrists refer to this dynamic as self-fulfilling prophecies. What does that mean? Okay, you're afraid. What are you afraid of? Let's take some examples. You're afraid that the people at work don't really like you. You're afraid you're not one of them. You're not one of them. You're afraid maybe it escalates to a little bit. You're afraid they're not accepting you. They might be talking behind your back. So how does this set in motion trains of circumstances which brings you more misfortune? Well, I had a job, and I was afraid the people there didn't accept me. So my fear, in order to protect myself from the fear, I got a little defensive. I got a little over-concerned with what they thought of me. I became the guy that was a little bit on edge around all of them. I couldn't see it because I can't see past myself, but I think in time, people started to walk on eggshells around me. I didn't know it. And I'm just afraid that they're not going to like me. And what happened? One day, I get called to the office and they say, Bob, you're a hard worker, but we're going to have to let you go. You're not a team player. And I made the fear come true. And I poured a lot of energy and a lot of time and a lot of worry. It was almost like I worried the fear into existence. Like you can worry. Like, do you ever see a dog will worry? It can take a big bone. It'll worry it right in half. Just chew it right in half. I would worry the fear into existence. Another time, in my early sobriety, my first sober relationship I ever got into, I was scared. I didn't know I was scared. I don't know much. I'm not awake to what's going on with me. I know I'm uncomfortable most of the time, and I'm driven and I feel a little vacant, but I don't know what the hell's going on. And I entered this relationship and I'm afraid. What am I afraid of? Well, now that I finally got a relationship, I'm afraid she's going to dump me. So what happens? That fear drives on me. It drives on me to be the guy that's always watching her in meetings. Some guy hugs her. I'm pulling him aside after the meeting. Hey, what are you hugging my girlfriend for? People are starting to look at me like I'm a little weird. Drove me on one or two occasions to drive by her apartment in the middle of the night, make sure no guys' cars are there. It drove me one time to look through her purse and make sure there's no guys' phone numbers in there. It drove me to start to smother her, and I don't even know I'm doing it. She said to me one time, and this is how focused I am on my fear, and I can't see what it's doing to you. She said to me one time, she said, I don't like to go to meetings with you. And I said, why not? She says, every time I look up, you're looking at me. I don't get it. And what happened? Started out afraid she was going to leave me. What happened? I literally drove her out of my life. I made the fear come true. I don't even know I'm doing that. I'm asleep in my own life. Fear sets in motion trains of circumstances which bring us more misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we, as it says earlier in the book, made decisions based on self, which later placed me in this position here? Did not we ourselves set the ball rolling? I am the co-creator of my own misery and the producer of my own confusion. I love that line earlier in the book. It says, We're producers of confusion rather than harmony. And it says that in our best moments, we're producers of confusion rather than harmony. Father Martin said something one time I thought was very astute. He said, you can go to any business, any family gathering, any civic organization, any place where groups of people come together, and they're together on a regular basis, and you can pick the alcoholics out. And you'll pick them out when they're sober, and you won't smell booze on them, but you'll be able to pick them out. You know how you pick them out? Look for the people that the others are walking on eggshells around. There was a friend of mine, Ray Val. Ray was a psychologist and a minister and a bunch of other, and a good AA member. And he used to take meetings into hospitals and stuff. And he was down at this psych ward one time, and he was asked to bring meetings in there. He came in, and he said to the nurse, "I'm here to put on the AA meeting. Could you round up the alcoholics, because we don't want everybody on the psych ward, just the alcoholics in the meeting." And so she just went out to the floor and said, "You." And he said, "You're not even looking at their case file. How do you know which ones are alcoholics?" And she said, "Oh, it's very easy. It's the ones that come up here and try to tell us how we should run the hospital." Yeah, I know. Ouch. Well, I wouldn't have to tell them if they did it right. I mean, geez. Just trying to be helpful. So what do we do? Oh, I love this line. Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more harm. Oh, isn't that true? Objectively, nothing has ever could rob me of intimacy, of love, of friendships, of abundance, and of opportunity as fear. I live in a world of abundant opportunities for all of that. It's coming at me all the time, and I'm knocking it down all the time. I bet you I'm not the only one in this room that's been given opportunities to do amazing stuff. And you say, I wouldn't like that. Why don't you go to school? You be a doctor. I'll just knock that stuff out of the sky like ballistic missiles, just I reject me before I ever get a chance. I reject the whole. Fear's always to rob me. I sat with an old timer one time. He was dying of cancer on his deathbed. And he was sober a long time, and he said something to me. I'll never forget. He said, when you look back over your life, when you're in the home stretch and you look back, he said, oddly enough, it's not the mistakes and the things you did wrong that you regret, as much as the things you were afraid to try, the people you were afraid to love. Fear steals it. It robs it. I have people in my life today that are very, very important to me. At one time, I kept them like this. Why? Because I'm afraid. I'm afraid if I let you in, you're not going to like me. You're going to reject me, so I'm going to reject you first. And the ego doesn't need much. All I have to do is get a vague feeling. If the ego is threatened at all, I just get a vague feeling you might not like me, and I will almost instantaneously find a reason not to like you. Oh, you're full of yourself. I can see it. Not my type of person. I'm just scared. That's all. Isn't it odd? You could go through life and you could be that way and be that out of touch with yourself that you don't even know you're doing that. Isn't that odd? I'm rejecting life itself, and I have justifications for every step of the way. And I'm scared. So what do? Well, the book says we reviewed our fears thoroughly. I'm a list guy. We put them on paper. I list the fears, even though I had no resentment in connection with them. So I'm listing all the fears. I had creditors I was afraid of. I had people I'd hurt that I had some slimy, sleazy things nobody knew about. I put it down. I was afraid people might find out. Anything that if the idea of any actions you've taken being on the front page of the Boston Globe makes you crazy, you've got to put it down there. Any secrets? People you owe money to that every time you think of the money you owe, you get a little anxious, because anxiety is a form of fear. Things that you think about that make you feel guilty. Guilty is a form of fear. 100 forms of it. Put it all down. And then here's a primary question, and this is the question that leads us to step 8. We ask ourselves, why do you have the fears? And remember, it doesn't tell you, don't know this up front. If your ego was read ahead, you're going to find out in a couple pages into the next chapter that you're inadvertently making your 8-step list when you write your inventory. Now, we don't like to tell new people that before they do their inventory because they're going to minimize it a lot, but we are. And here's the vehicle to the amends, the unfinished business. Remember, amends is not about right and wrong. The ego's in the right and wrong business. Amends is about restoring unity, connectivity. It's mending the separation. And so I ask myself, why do I have the fears? And this is an important question. Why do you have the fear? I'll give you a couple examples. It's tax time. You always get anxious at tax time. Why are you afraid of tax time? Oh, because you cheated on your taxes in the past. Okay. Oh, I don't want to go to that meeting. I don't like this people. I don't want to go to that meeting. Why don't you want to go to that meeting? I just feel uncomfortable there. I don't like that meeting. I feel uncomfortable, like anxious there. Yeah. I squirmy. I just not comfortable there. So you're something about that spooks you a little bit. Well, I just don't like the people there. Well, who? Who don't you like there? Well, Joe. Joe. He's not my kind of friend. Joe. I don't like Joe. I don't like Joe. Why are you anxious around Joe? I just don't like Joe. Why are you afraid of Joe? Is it possible because every time Joe's name comes up, you say something terrible about him behind his back and you're afraid maybe somebody told him? Why are you afraid? What did you do? What did you do? Why are you afraid? I don't want to go in this relationship. I'm afraid it's going to fold. Why? Because I ruined the last 5. I don't want to take this job. Why? Because I'm probably going to lose it. Why? Because you lost the last one, didn't you? Sometimes my fears are based on the past, but the book gives us kind of an answer. I'm trying to find out if there's unfinished business, if things need to be mended here. So I ask myself why we had them, and then it kind of comes back with a rhetorical answer that is broad spectrum across the board. And it's a true answer, but I think it's very important to look. I encourage the guys I sponsor to look for specifics here because you're inadvertently building an 8-step list. You're going to uncover your creditors. You're going to uncover people you owe. Situations need mended. And it says, wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? Self-reliance is good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. And some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. And when it drove me to be cocky, and it made me cocky, it was worse. It really was. When you're self-reliant and you're the center of your life and you're responsible for all of it, when you're the center of the universe, I'm telling you, there is a lot of things to worry about. Oh my God. There's a world full of people and they're all thinking things. I don't know what they're thinking. I suspect it's about me. I have to accuse them of it occasionally just to see if I can uncover it. Did you ever have that feel? I had 3 years before I got sober was the last time I was allowed into my parents' house, and I went in there because I burnt my life to the ground drinking. It was horrible. It was the last time they let me in there. And I went sober. I didn't drink. I did not drink. I didn't have to take medications. I did nothing for months. And I'll tell you, the anxiety and the worry built up into me until I eventually had a nervous breakdown. And if you would have asked me what I was afraid of, I couldn't have told you. It was everything. It was just life, and just living was too big. And I ended up in I did have a nervous breakdown. I ended up in a psychiatrist's office who diagnosed me as free-floating anxiety with panic disorder and gave me some anti-anxiety medication, which gave me a little bit of relief, enough relief to make me come to my senses and realize how stupid it was to stop drinking when that's what I really wanted to do all along. And I went back into the bar and found the proper relief that I really needed and proceeded to, because of an allergic reaction to alcohol, to burn my life to the ground again. But when I was sober, with unmedicated, untreated alcoholism, and I was the center of the universe, and my God, the fear was just overwhelming. It was incapacitating. And it just would consume me and paralyze me. And sometimes it would look like deep clinical depression, and other times I would be so angst, I would just be nuts, pacing and just crazy. Self-reliance failed me. You see, I couldn't think my way out of any of it. I couldn't change my emotional nature, as it talks about one of the symptoms of the spiritual malady. Fear, self-reliance is good. And it says when it was made us cocky, it was worse. In my lifetime, I have reacted to fear one of two ways. Sometimes when I'm afraid and threatened, I will react like a turtle, and I will pull my head into my shell, and I will just withdraw from life itself and just hope it goes away. And other times, I'll react to fear when I'm threatened like a skunk, and I'll spray everybody around me. And of the two positions, I suppose the turtle is somewhat better because the turtle makes less amends than the skunk. But neither one's good, really. The book says perhaps there is a better way. I hope so. Perhaps there is a better way. We think so, for we're now on a different basis. Where else does it use the word basis when it's talking about step 3? The decision in step 3 is the new basis for life. We're now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. We trust infinite God, who has the capacity to handle the load, rather than my finite self. For me to be the center of the universe, worrying about it all, it's like going into your kitchen and getting the blender that's designed for the 110 and taking it into the laundry room and plugging it into the outlet for the 220 for the dryer. It does not have the capacity to handle the load. It will burn out. You will short circuit it. Isn't it? If you're like me and you're angst up with fear right before you think you're going to lose your mind, it doesn't feel like you're overloaded, like you're short circuited. I was in a meeting one time, and this woman who was brand new, she hadn't worked any steps. She was maybe 3 months sober, and she'd been out there living life dry with untreated alcoholism for 3 months. And she came into the meeting, and she had this horrible look on her face. I said, "Johan, what's the matter?" She looked at me with this horrible look, and she said, "It's too big." Oh, I knew what she meant. It is, isn't it? It's too big. So we trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. I can't. I'm not God. My ego doesn't like that. I'm not God. I don't have the capacity to carry the load. Isn't it odd that we live at a time when all of a sudden, out of therapy and different treatment centers, we have this adamant opposition to statements like you're feeling inadequate, and people say, "Oh, you're not inadequate. Just got to think positive." Or when people say, "I just don't feel like I'm enough." "Oh, yes, you are." Oh, I'll tell you something. Truthfully, the greatest, most genuine thing I have going for me is my inadequacy and my sense of not enoughness. It's what brings me to the table with you. And it's what brings me to the table with God. If I was adequate and enough, I would be out of this leper colony in a heartbeat. You think I'd have paid back all that money if I was enough and I was adequate? You think I'd do half the stuff we do here? I wouldn't need God. I wouldn't need you. I'd need nothing. I'd just go and be enough. But the truth is, and the best thing that I have going for me is that I am not enough, and I need you, and I need this process, and I need to access God. Because the truth is, I am not enough. And I never was, and I never will be. That is something I embrace. I don't discount it. I don't talk myself out of it. I think it's the greatest blessing I have. It keeps me here. Watch people who become enough and what happens to them. They just like release children's helium balloons. They just sail off to we don't know where they go. And every once in a while you'll see them in a detox. Oh, you're the guy that used to be enough, aren't you? Oh, yeah, you're the guy. You got over your alcoholism, didn't you? Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. How's that working for you? So we trust infinite God rather than our finite selves. We are in the world to play the role He assigns, just to the extent that we do as we have us, as we think He would have us. I love that. Just to the extent as we do what we think He would have us do. We don't even have to be right. I think my intention to find and serve God is good enough. I don't even have to hit it. I just have to try to head myself. All I have to have is the desire to find and do His will, and that's enough. When it says earlier in the book that God does not make hard terms with those who seek Him, thank you. Because if you had to hit this, if I had to hit this on the money every time, I'd be out of. I'm not good at that. As long as I just do what I think. If I just try to imagine what God would do. Don used to say all the time, he just said, whatever you're doing, ask God to go with you. I had another friend that said, you can do anything you want in sobriety as long as you can get up in front of your home group and talk about what you did. That eliminates a lot. That eliminates a lot. As long as it's out in the light of day. The ego in all its squirminess grows the best in the dark. So I try to live in the light. I try to live out here. My natural inclination is to live up in here, but I try to live out here. I try. So we trust our God. It uses that word trust several times in these two middle paragraphs. And I think that's the crux of the matter. That's why faith isn't enough for us. Guys like me can have tremendous faith and drink themselves to death praying. It's not enough. I have to actualize that faith. I have to trust God. I heard a guy told me a story years ago. He said the difference, he said you can drink yourself to death with a lot of faith and praying. He said if you don't learn how to trust. He said the difference is if you went to a circus and you sat in the audience and you watched a tight wire act, and you watched a man, a professional, come out to the edge of the wire on the platform pushing a wheelbarrow. You could have all the faith in the world. He's a professional. He could walk across that tight wire pushing that wheelbarrow. Absolute faith. He did it. I bet she's done it 1,000 times. I know he can do it. But if you trusted, you'd go up and get in the wheelbarrow. And when he said that, I had this sinking feeling because I knew what he meant. He meant that I had to let go of my life and get in the wheelbarrow. That I had to actually live as if God had me. I had to get in the wheelbarrow. And I tell you, I have a hard time with that. I'm not against it. Intellectually, I like it. I can see the value. I like going to book studies where we read about getting in the wheelbarrow. I like going to discussion meetings where we discuss the values and benefits of getting in the wheelbarrow. I'd like to go out to coffee with a bunch of us and we sit around and talk about the wonders of the wheelbarrow. I just ain't getting in the goddamn wheelbarrow. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm afraid. I'm afraid and hardwired with certain fears that if I ever had that much abandonment and surrendered to that degree and became that vulnerable and actually got in the wheelbarrow all alone, and allowed God to push me across that wire, my insides tell me I'd get about halfway across that wire and I'd hear him go, "Is that Bob?" Oh no. Over the side. What do you do if you're like me? What do you do if you know intellectually you must surrender? You know that you're ruining yourself sober by not getting in the wheelbarrow and managing your own life. You know you're not stupid. You get it. You get the cause and effect. 3 inventories in, you get it. But you can't get in the wheelbarrow. How do you stop worrying about the thing you can't stop worrying about? How do you get in the wheelbarrow? Well, page 53. It's what happened to me. It's what happens to a lot of us, I suppose. In the middle of page 53, it talks about something that I think happens to most of us after we're sober a while. In the middle, right in the middle of the page, we became alcoholics. And check the language out. It says, I love this word, crushed. In sobriety, I have felt crushed many times by self-imposed. I did this. I'm reaping the repercussions of my actions, made decisions based on self. I'm feeling crushed by self-imposed crisis that I cannot postpone, I cannot evade, I cannot weasel my way out of it, I can't buy my way out of it. I am being crushed by something and there is no relief and there is no friendly direction here and I can't escape this. And at that time, it says we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else he's nothing. He either is or he isn't. And then the great question, Bob, what's your choice to be? When I was a few months sober, I was crushed the first time by a self-imposed crisis I couldn't postpone or evade. A judge in Pennsylvania sentenced me to 2 years in a state penitentiary. Was kind to me and gave me a break, told me if I went into a place called the Ark House and stayed there for a year, stayed sober, got good urinalysis reports, good PO reports, and made the restitution, that he would not carry out the 2-year sentence. It would be a time served misdemeanor. If not, it was a felony in 2 years. And he'd stayed the commitment on hold. And I couldn't stay sober, and I went on the run. And I'm hitchhiking, trying to get to California. I made it to Las Vegas. I ended up in a halfway house out of detox. The fog's starting to clear, and as the fog clears, the anxiety of the warrants that I know by now are on me. And it's making me crazy. And I went to an old-timer in AA, and I told him about it. And he said, well, you know what you have to do? You have to call your PO up and offer to come back at your own expense and do the 2 years. And I said, what? Are you crazy? I'm going to meetings here. I'm involved. I got a sponsor. I'm doing good here. I'm not drinking. He says, yeah, you're doing good. He said, but you have to do this. I said, I don't jail well. I don't do this. No, can't I just go to meetings and be sober? He said, you have to do this, kid. I said, what are you talking about? Now, I'm trying to postpone and evade here. And he explained it to me. He said, well, listen, you want to stay sober? I said, yes, I want to stay sober. You want to die of alcoholism? No, I don't want to die of alcoholism. Well, then, kid, answer me this. How long are you going to stay sober looking over your shoulder? You can't get a job and use your Social Security number. Every time a cop car goes down the street, your gut's going to cinch up because you don't know if that cop's got your picture on his dashboard and he's looking for you or not. How long are you going to live under that anxiety until you'll be driven to take something or drink something or something? And you know when you hear the truth. I know the truth when I hear it. I don't like it sometimes, but I know it when I hear it. And I said, man, I said, what do I do? He said, you need to contact them and offer. He said, they may want to tack on some more years because you've split and crossed, I don't know how many state lines. I thought, this is not getting any better. He said, all right, what do I do? He said, write him a letter. I'll tell you what. He says, write your PO a letter. Tell him where you live. You mean the address? He said, yeah. Oh, I thought that was a very bad idea. But then they'll be able to send a marshal and pick me up. He says, yeah, if they want to pick you up, they need to know where to get you. This guy, I don't know why I'm listening to him. He's like, but anyway, he's telling me, he says, write the letter, tell your PO you'll call him, give him 10 days. That's a long enough time. Allow him to get the letter, think about what they want to do with you. Call them, give them a time and a day. Give them about 10 days out. So I looked on the calendar, picked a time and day. I said, in the letter, I said, okay, I'll call you at such and such a time, your time, on such and such a day. And I showed him the letter. He said, that's good. I took it to the post office. I tell you, I dropped it in the post office, and then I'm trying to get my arm in there to get it back. Honest to God, I couldn't. You do those little tiny things. You can't get your arm in there. And I went crazy. I thought I was going to have I was having an anxiety attack. I remember thinking to myself, what did I just do? Oh my God, now they knew where I can pick me up. What am I listening? This guy who's told me to do this, he's never even been to prison. What am I listening to him for God's sakes? This is crazy. I was going to leave. I was going to move to California and hide. And they convinced me that if I left and ran, I'd drink. And I knew they were right. I waited the 10 days. Tough 10 days, I'll tell you. Couldn't sleep much. Try to sleep. Started having visions of whether I'd enjoy being married to Bubba. Jeez. 10th day came, long 10 days. The 10th day came, I went to that phone. I'm shaking inside. I'm so scared. I dialed that number. This woman answered the phone. She said, he's expecting your call. Put me through. And a man that didn't really know me. I'd sat in his office a couple times, I guess. A man who had no reason to do anything positive for me. A man who I'm just a pain in the ass to. And on his caseload, got on the phone and he said, I talked to my supervisor, we talked to the courts, and you don't have to come back and do the 2 years. But here's what you have to do. He gave me a list of stuff that was all very easy to do. I had to send him some money until it was paid off. I had to go get urinalysis tests down at the place called CRS, and I had to see a guy that was going to be my PO, and the case was being transferred to Nevada. And he said, if you do all that, at the end of a year, you'll be free and off the hook. But kid, you don't get another chance. This is it. And everything he told me to do, I was willing to do. It was easy. I remember hanging up that phone and walking away. I felt like I felt high. I didn't know if I wanted to laugh or cry. I mean, it was just such an amazing feeling of freedom, like some heavy thing had been lifted off me. And it was like a postcard from a God I don't even believe in yet. Dear Bob, we got your back. Love, God. It was the first and up to that time only time in my life I ever put myself at risk to take directions that I didn't agree with or feel like taking. And isn't that what a surrendered guy does? He follows someone else's directions even though it scares him and terrifies him. And I think trust is like a muscle. The more you exercise it, the stronger it gets. I was forced into the wheelbarrow because I had nowhere to go. I mean, there's nowhere to go. I'm telling you, honest to God, if I could have maneuvered a way out of that deal, if I could have pulled one, if I could have slipped one, I'd have slipped it, and I've never faced that. There was nowhere to go. And over the years, I've been in that spot several times where either God's everything or he's nothing. He better be there. He better be there because I got no move here and I'm scared. God, you better be there. And he is. I told him about 10 years ago, I just in prayer came to him one day. I said, listen, I'm really trying here, and I'm going to keep trying to find and do your will, and I want to do everything I think you want me to do. But if you screw me up, I'm going to tell everybody. And God's been very good to me. He's been very good to me. I trust him now. It took 30 years probably. It's not a big deal anymore. I get things that come up all the time that scare me. I make decisions based on self. I spend too much money on. I went through a thing. I get stupid sometimes. I went through a deal a year or so ago where I got obsessed with rare, handmade, expensive guitars, and they're like $5,000 or more a piece, and I bought 17 of them in a very short period of time, which is not good for your cash flow, I'm telling you. And it was a stupid knucklehead And I'm going, oh, God, I screwed it now. I went too far with this. And stuff shows up. It's just, I'm embarrassed how at times I will make stupid decisions and he cut my back. I mean, if I was God, I'd hang you out to dry. I would not back my play if I was God. And we should all be very grateful that I am not God. And I'm very grateful I'm not God. I think it was George Bernard Shaw said, he said, God created us in his image and unfortunately we returned the favor. That I at times imagined God would be as vindictive and vengeful and tough as I would be. Thank God he's not. And I think that some of us, as we walk through fear and we trust God, we learn we learn the power. We get to peep God as he works in our lives. And so the book says we do this and we commence to outgrow fear. As I ask God to remove the fear and try to get this vision of what's the guy in the wheelbarrow look like. I ask God to remove the fear and turn my attention to what he would have me be. What's God's guy look like? How does he conduct his life when he's afraid? Earlier in the book, it says we found that spiritual principles would solve all our problems. How does a guy living on spiritual principles act when he's in a bad spot? Those are the kind of things that I need to get a vision of that, because there's going to be times I can't get a hold of my sponsor and I don't know what to do. And I have to emulate the vision of God's will. I have to be the guy I would hope he would have me be. And that sometimes is very contrary to what I want to do. One of my favorite lines in the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions is the beginning of step 5. It talks about the 12 steps and these actions we take run contrary to our basic desires. And my sponsor always says that. He says, this is contrary action. He always says things to me like, he'll say to everybody, he says, act better than you feel. And I've been very fortunate. I've had very good and very strong sponsorship over the years. And I need it. If you're new, you know how you can tell if you have a good sponsor? If everything your sponsor says you think is a good idea and you agree with, you may not have a good sponsor. That would scare me. With my track record, that probably wouldn't be a good sponsor for me. He'd be too much like me. I need a sponsor that I'll listen to. I need a sponsor that is very concerned with my actions. And my sponsor is very concerned with my actions. To be honest with you, he's not a nurturing guy. I mean, if you want nurturing, get a girlfriend or a dog or something. I know he's not a nurturing guy at all, but he doesn't even really care about how I feel. I mean, he'll listen. Sometimes I'll prattle on, I'll whine on about something, and he'll just turn on his machine. But man, is he concerned with what I'm doing? How am I acting in this situation? How am I conducting? Because he doesn't care what I think or what I feel or what I believe. He's very concerned with what I do. See, I don't want to shine too much light on what I'm doing. I'd rather shine some light on my intentions. I'd rather talk about my feelings and stuff. And he wants to look dead on at my actions. And the beauty of that is that my feelings have really little to do with my reality. Self-centered, self-obsessed, self-absorbed, self-focused people like myself have a tendency to judge everything and to predict and conclude how we're doing based on how we feel. Well, that is such an erroneous, narcissistic view, and it means nothing. Matter of fact, it can get you in a lot of trouble. There have been times in my sobriety where between 11 and 15 years, I went through a period where I was building a house of cards based on self-gratification and self-grandizement, toys and expensive cars and motorcycles, just crazy self stuff. And if you're building a life of self-gratification, you're building a house of cards based on self, as long as you're getting your own way and you're building the house before it collapses, it feels pretty cool because you're getting your own way. And if you'd asked me how I was doing at that period of my life, I'd say, oh, I'm doing great. See this new car? See this? I'd have pointed to the stuff. If you'd asked my sponsor how I was doing, I suppose he would have said something like, well, if he stays sober through this one, he might help some people. Because he would have judged how I was doing by what I was doing, not on how I felt. And how was I doing? I was living a life of self-service. It was right before I changed sponsors. My first sponsor wouldn't have confronted me with that. He would let me do it, and he would have let me continue to let me do it. And when I hit a bottom with that is when I got the sponsor I have now. A sponsor who doesn't give me any slack. A few years ago, with the sponsor I have today, I went through divorce, and it's actually 10 years ago, I think. It was a tough time. And there were days in the middle of that where if you'd asked me how I was doing, and if I'd be honest with you, I would have said, I'm just hanging in there. I'm not doing that good. I'm just trying to get through this, that's all. Trying to keep my mouth shut and do the right thing and just get through this. It was tough. If you'd asked my sponsor how I was doing, he would have said, and he did say, he said, Bob's doing great. He calls me a couple times a week. He goes to his commitments down to detox. He returns his phone calls. He's sponsoring guys. He's an active member of his home group. He shows up where he's supposed to show up. He does what he's supposed to do. Bob's doing okay. He feels like crap, but he's doing okay. Because he would have judged how I was doing based on what I was doing, which is the only reality in my life. And thank God for objective conclusions, because I would have told you I was doing horrible. And I probably never done better through that period of time. I was an amazing example of Alcoholics Anonymous under stress. And there is no better example. Anybody can be a good example of AA when things are going your own way. When you're a good example of Alcoholics Anonymous under stress and fear, that there's no higher calling than that here. And I didn't do that. My sponsor's direction led me to that. This brings us up to the sex inventory. And it starts on the bottom of page 68. And most of the questions in the actual working part of it's on 69. One of these days, if I ever see Bill Wilson in heaven, I'm going to ask him, did you plan that or was God showing off? I don't know. Is that a cosmic joke, Bill, or what? What's that about? And, I'm really delighted that the sex inventory, it's funny how with your prejudice about stuff, you'll hear people say things like, you could never take a fifth step with a member of the opposite sex because of the sex inventory. Do you know people that say that? I don't think they've ever done a sex inventory because it's not about sex. They take that thinking that it's about sex. There's nothing in here about sex. What it's about selfishness. It's about dishonesty. How I'll lie to you because I'm afraid you won't love me or you'll leave me. It's about self-seeking. It's about fear. It's about inconsideration, self-centered inconsideration. It's about manipulation. How I'll manipulate others to get more attention or whatever through arousing jealousy, suspicion, bitterness. There's no question. There's not one question in here doesn't even ask you anything about sex because it's not about sex. It's about how my ego gets wacky when the sexual instinct and everything that comes with it can be threatened. In the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, it talks about the 3 S's that drive us. The instinct for security, both material and emotional. The instinct for a position of society, how so much we're driven and concerned with how we look to others and how we fit and what they think of us. And then the third S is the sex instinct. And it is in the venue of sexual relationships where all three of those instincts can be threatened. And the greater the propensity to fear, the greater the inclination to defects of character. As it says in step 7 and 12 by 12, it's the chief activator of all my defects. So I'm going to discover, as I did, that I have a greater capacity for dishonesty in relationships than I did with money. You'd think you'd be more prone to be dishonest with money. I found that I'm more prone to be dishonest, and I'm not alone in this. And it's a crazier kind of dishonesty. It's kind that I don't even realize it's dishonest. And that's what makes it so insidious. I have a greater propensity for selfishness, even though I hide it so well, because I can act so affectionate and so loving and so caring on the outside. But isn't the truth that I'm doing that for selfish motives? Isn't the truth that that's just a facade, that I'm doing it because I want something from you? I want your love. I want you to stay here. I don't want to be alone. I want to get laid. Something. There's some self-serving in it. And the dishonesty is probably the worst. This delusional ability that a lot of us have. I can tell you a couple little stories. Somebody I know pretty well a few years ago fell in love with this gal who he met in AA. And they got engaged to be married. And they decided, as appropriate, to have the money talk before they got married. I mean, if you're going to a partnership on that level with someone, you need to talk about money. I mean, it's a distasteful subject, but it's important because you're going to be bound to each other financially. So they had the money talk, and he said to her, well, you need to talk about finances, and I'd like to know where you are with credit card debt. Do you have any credit card debt? Well, they'd been together for a while. She'd heard him many times talk to people he sponsored and other people in AA about how he didn't believe in credit card debt and how he didn't like that. So she said to him, she says, oh, no, I don't believe in credit card debt. I pay my credit cards off all the time. Well, the truth is she had 3 credit cards and they were maxed out. She was barely paying. She really couldn't even pay the minimum payments on them anymore. And he said, have you ever been through a bankruptcy? And she'd heard him. She knew where he stood on that. She'd heard him tell a guy he sponsored one time that you couldn't use a legal vehicle to beat someone out of something, that if you have to use bankruptcy for reorganization, but you still have to pay them. He said, I don't believe in bankruptcy. You pay your debts. So she said to him, oh, I'd never had a bankruptcy. Well, the truth was she'd already had one. And if they don't get married, her debt is in such a way she's just this far from the next one. She's almost at the next one. And she lied to him about both those things and a couple other things. And they get married, and of course, you know what happens. We're so delusional. We think we can sweep that stuff under the rug. It comes up eventually. And it came up well after they were married. And it just shook the whole foundation of trust in their marriage. Because when trust is a funny thing. It's very hard. Once it's been really broken, it's very hard to repair. I mean, it can be done, but it takes a while. And once that's broken, so all of a sudden you don't trust anything. When trust goes, it goes. You'd be surprised if you have a spouse and they cheat on you, all of a sudden you don't trust them in other areas. You don't trust what they say anymore. That's the way trust is. It incurs into fear in you. And so when that came to the surface, all of a sudden it's like he doesn't even know who he's married to. It ruined the foundation. And they never. Some people come back from that. They couldn't come back from it because she just kept defending and justifying her position. And she would only give up what became so obvious. Eventually, it all came out, and it was like pulling teeth for him to get the truth. And here's the tragic part. After the relationship went south, she stayed sober for a little while and then eventually went out. And she believed and reinforced an old lie. And here's the old lie. See, you don't let everybody know everything about you or else they'll throw you away. And that's reinforced in her. She thinks that the marriage was destroyed because he found out the truth. No, the marriage was destroyed because they found out the lie. There's a world of difference between those two positions. And she never got it, and she reinforced the old position. And the real sad part is I know the guy very well. I know that if she'd have come forthright with him and she would have said, oh, sweetheart, I got to tell you, I got 3 credit cards. They're maxed out. I'm struggling to make the minimum payments. I can't always even make it. I'm getting penalties. And I've had a bankruptcy, and I'm afraid of having another one. I know this guy, he loved her. I believe with everything in me, he would have said, whew, really? Well, sweetheart, I love you. It's going to take us a couple years. We'll dig our way out of this. It's going to be okay. I think maybe from now on I should handle the money, but we'll get ourselves out of this. And she would have found out the sweetest thing she could have ever found out. That there really are people that will love you as is. That you don't have to be something you're not. I would rather have you hate me for what I am than love me for something I'm not. I tell the guys I sponsor, I said, you got honesties first. You're gonna date somebody. You just might as well be very upfront. Tell them, give them the worst. Tell them on the first date. Tell them how self-centered you are. Tell them how inconsiderate you can be. Tell them the worst. Just even your worst, give them the worst. Give them the worst. Even if you go on your first date and say, hey, pull my finger. Whatever the worst thing is, just put it out there. And if they can live with the worst, they're going to get the best. But if they can't live with the worst, they're not going to live with you because that's going to be part of you. And you might find out that there are people that will take you as is, all of you, the good and the bad. If you can only be the good aspect of you in a relationship, you can't be yourself. You're not free. You have to be yourself. Some of us put up facades for years, months, years, relationships. And then what happens? You hear it in AA all the time. I've been with them a year and a half. Seems like they're changing. No, they're not. That's just, you're finally meeting the real person. They just couldn't maintain the facade anymore. They got comfortable enough in the relationship to show you the real person now. And now we get to find out. I think it's better off being up front. There's more dishonesty in relationships than probably anywhere else because there's more fear. I don't lie because I'm a liar. I lie because I'm scared. I lie because I'm afraid you're going to reject me. I lie because I'm afraid you're not going to love me. I lie because I believe a pathetic old idea that as is the way God made me, I'm not enough. So I have to fabricate a facade. I bet you there's people in this room that are in relationships that your partner hasn't really met all of you yet, have they? They're in for a shock, aren't they? Yeah, they are. I know. One day, it comes out, doesn't it? It always comes out. You cannot deny who you are. God changes us, but in His own time and His own way. And lack of power really is my dilemma. So I trust in God and I be myself, as is. And a funny thing happens to us, I think, over time is, I don't know that I've gotten that much. God's changed me quite a bit, I suppose. But I've sure gotten comfortable with who I am. I really like me. There's not a person on the planet I'd rather be than me. And I have a lot of problems, and I have a lot of weaknesses, and I have a lot of defects, and a lot of shortcomings. But I'll take them. They're mine. They're familiar. I've kind of settled into them. They're not perfect by any means, but I'm good. I'm good with Bob. I'm the best with me I've ever been. I like me. And it's funny, when you really and truly and genuinely like yourself as is, it doesn't matter so much whether you like me or not. when I really didn't like me, oh, it was a big piece of business what you thought of me. It was a big piece of business. But you get right with yourself and you're right with the people around you and right with God, you're just right. When you ain't right with those things, there ain't nothing right. And some of us know the hard way that no matter how right we get it outside, if it ain't right inside, it ain't right. So, sex. I list the relationships. I ask these questions. Where had I been selfish? I'm a me first person. Where would I have been dishonest? Where was I inconsiderate? I'm a very inconsiderate person, I'll tell you, to this day. It's not conscious. I am like a lot of self-centered alcoholics. I just get so wrapped up looking at what's going on with me that I don't even see you. You know, it's not conscious. I just can't. At times, I'll get so much on my mind that I'm just, even the last couple of years, I start to glimpse what it must be like to be around me when I'm preoccupied with stuff and problems in myself. It must feel like I don't even think you're in the room. Right? Now, isn't it, that's not a conscious, malicious inconsideration. It's just, I just get me smeared in my life and my worries smeared across the windshield of the car. I can't see anything except that. But man, I know. I'm awake enough to know if you're on the outside looking in, it feels like you've been discounted. It feels like you've been shut out. Were you shut out consciously? No. Were you shut out? Yeah, you were. Yeah, you were. Was it malicious? No. It seems to be part and parcel of self-centered people. I give you a couple interesting examples. I have a friend who's married to a gal, and he adores her. And he's learned over the years, he has to, when they have to go somewhere to a dinner party or a meeting or a conference or something, he has to lie to her about what time they have to be there. Because if he says to her, we have to leave the house at 7 o'clock, they're lucky to get out of the house at 7:20. Now, she's not being inconsiderate the fact that he has to be there. It's not about that at all. She has good intentions. It's 5 of 7. She's dressed and ready to go, and she looks in the mirror and she goes, not that dress, no. She has to go back and change her dress and tries another one. Yeah, but not with those shoes. And then she tries it. And next thing you know, it's 20 after 7. She doesn't even see that she's doing that. And it's making him crazy. Because it's important to him to be on time. It's more important to her. She considers how she looks above how he feels about being on time. Doesn't matter if it's a thing for his work, for his business, and his boss is going to be there and he's expected to. She doesn't even see that. So he has to tell her, oh, we got to leave at 6:30. But she usually gets them out of there at the time they wanted to leave at 7. That's not a malicious inconsideration. Guys do it all the time. I bet you there's guys in this room that you put a ball game on and your wife just went to Jamaica. You don't even know she's there anymore. Or you're talking to one of your friends on the phone, or you're worried about finances, or you're sitting looking at your checkbook, or you're worried about something. Whoever else is in your life just kind of gets shut right out. But if you're on the receiving end of that, it feels like it's inconsideration. And it's part and parcel of being a self-centered person. My sponsor said to me, you're not guilty for anything you've ever done, drunk or sober. But you are responsible because you did it. Did you mean to do it? No. Does that matter? No. You did it. So you're responsible. And it is my job to clean it up. It's my job to try to make amends. It's my job to try to bring some grace into my life, to shift it so I don't keep doing these same things over and over again. And I have a tendency, I'll wear stuff out. And the only hope to change some of these things is just to keep asking for God's help, to keep trying to bring grace in and make amends. It's odd how if you make amends enough for something, you stop doing it as much. Anyway, where was I? Whom had I hurt? Good question. I'm creating this 8-step list. Did I unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? It's done sometimes as a form of manipulation. You're not getting enough attention from your mate, so you get flirtatious with someone around them to bring their attention back on you. Where was I at fault? And this is, I think, the most important question. What should I have done instead? And the reason I believe that's important is that a little later down the page, there's a prayer. And the prayer is that I ask God to mold my ideals and help me to live up to them. I'm trying to develop a vision for my future sex life. I really get how out of line I've been here and what I don't want to be. And if I get a vision of what I should have done instead, I got something to go. I got something to aspire to. And if I don't have a vision of what I should have done instead in this situation, here's what my experience is. You're going to get a do-over. Maybe 5 or 10 years later, you're going to be in another relationship with a different person. You screwed the last one up. And you're going to get a do-over. And now emotionally, you're in the same spot, different people, different time, different place, but it's really the same. And if I don't have a vision of what I should have done instead back there, coupled with God's power and grace to do it, what's going to happen? I'll do the same thing I did back there. That's why our sexual inventories are often so repetitive. It's like the same. And then I did this, and then I did that, and then I did. It's like the same. There's a pathetic sameness to it, one right after another. I rejected them, and then I found somebody that didn't like me, and I rejected. I was obsessed with her, and she rejected me. I found someone that was obsessed with me, and I rejected her. And then it's like a patterns that occur. What should I have done instead? You get do-overs. There's a tremendous amount of mercy in my experience in the realm of the Spirit. Tremendous. I've gotten some beautiful do-overs in my life where I've screwed some things up, and I got another shot to do it different. I know some friends that, by their own stories, were horrific parents, child-abusing, drunken parents. And they get do-overs and get to be some of the most amazing grandparents. It's their do-over. There's a yearning for redemption that actualizes itself here. We get to make things right some way. One way or another, we get to make things right here. We will get a shot. There is redemption here. And so what should I have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. We ask God to mold our ideals, help us to live up to them, remembering always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good. Really? I thought they came from Satan. That's what the nuns told me as a kid. They were God-given and therefore good. Why would I ever imagine that there's anything that is part and parcel of my essence and nature that would be naturally corrupt? Why would God don't make no corruption? Why would He put something in me that was corrupt? Now, I might use it to my own selfish ends. I may use it with an absolute self-centered, self-obsessed inconsideration, and others get hurt. But if you take the self out of it, I think it's a blessing. And you know how you can tell? Self-gratification in any of its forms always leaves the backwash the same. It's self-gratification, whether it's in material or sexual, it doesn't really matter. The venue, it's always the same deal, isn't it? You're going into it with a high level of excitement. This is going to be very, very cool. It's almost like going to Disneyland on the 4th of July to ride that ride, Space Mountain. Ever been on Space Mountain, George, 4th of July weekend? You go to Disneyland on the 4th of July. First of all, it's the day when there's 12,000 children that have overdosed on sugar. And they're all just loud, screaming, wacky, crazy. It's 98 degrees, maybe 100, 98% humidity. And you're miserable, sweating, you stand in that line at Space Mountain 4 or 5 hours. Screaming, crazy ADD kids around you, just moving around, drinking pop and sugar and just nuts. You feel like you're in hell. 4 hours, you're in hell, like it never ends. It seems like every lifetime you look up and you've moved up 4 feet in the line. And it's just, you just want to hang yourself before you're even there. And you do all of this torturous, tedious hell for about 40 seconds of gratification and excitement. Self-gratification's the reverse of that. We're going to give you 40 seconds of excitement and gratification up front, and then you're going to feel bad about yourself for about 6 months. And the crazy thing is, in alcoholic, that seems like a good deal. Give me a couple minutes of feeling good, and maybe in exchange for feeling like a piece of crap for 6 months. Yeah, I think that weighs out. I think that's a good deal. So, the promise later comes that by now sanity will return. I think I'm going to talk about 2 minutes to 5 minutes on step 5. We're going to quit early. I'm not going to read the section on step 5. I'll tell you why to do it. The book says, best reason first. It's one of just a couple places in the book that says if you don't do this, you're probably not going to stay sober. That's a pretty good reason. It talks about why. It says time and time again, we don't clean house, so we start to live a double life. And the double life kills us. And I love the example it gives of the stage character. The person we want to present, we want everybody to think we are, and then secretly we know what we really are. And I've been that guy sober. And it's a deadly, deadly place. My great-grandsponsor said, you cannot compartmentalize your life. It'll kill you. We just buried a guy who tried to compartmentalize his life. He'd go to AA meetings and talk really, really spiritual. And then in his business dealings, he ripped off and cheated everybody he ever did business with. It killed him. It took a lot of years, and a lot of people got hurt as a result. There were people who left Alcoholics Anonymous with bad resentments because he'd ripped them off when they were newcomers. He did a lot of damage, and it killed him. It took a little while. He died addicted to Oxycontin, pretending he was sober. The last time I saw him in a meeting, he was so loaded, he was nodding out during the meeting and talking about how long he was sober. It was pathetic. He's dead. We can't live the double life. I can't compartmentalize my life, which means that I have to have integrity. I have to have oneness. I have to be the same guy in my home group as I am with my daughter, as I am in business, as I am in the bank, as I am in traffic. And if you're a jerk in all those places, at least be a jerk in every one of them, but be the same person. Be the same person. We get lost in the abyss that opens up between the facade and who I really am. I think that's hell. It's the place I get lost from myself, trying to live the double life. I've done that sober. I developed a gambling addiction in my early sobriety. It was horrible. The end result is at less than 2 years sober, I'm thinking about killing myself. Because it was Friday night, I just got paid that day, and I jacked off my whole paycheck again, and there was no one left to borrow money from, and I didn't have the rent money. And during that period, there'd be periods where I just jacked off all my money, and I would feel horrible, and I'd be right at the edge of the abyss of a deep depression, and I would go to my commitment at the meeting, and I remember pulling up to the AA clubhouse, and out in the parking lot, I just feel so awful. It was almost as if I opened the glove compartment, I reached in, I pulled out this super sober hero suit and zipped it up, the Mr. Spiritual suit, and went in and you could hear angel wings flopping in the background when I spoke. And then I would go home and sink into a deep depression of self-loathing for jacking my paycheck off again, sober. I know the double life. Guys like me die in the double life. I must find transparency. I must, and it begins in step 5. Maybe some of us, it begins before that with a sponsorship that we start to open up to our sponsor. Back in the years ago when I was, many years ago, when I was working as a therapist, we used to have this one tool that we'd talk about sometimes in groups and sometimes in sessions. It's odd. I used it, and I don't think I knew what it meant until after I got sober a long time and I started thinking about it. It's called the Johari Window. So if any of you had any therapeutic training and stuff, you might remember the Johari Window. I don't think it's used much anymore. But this guy came up with this concept that there were 4 windows into us. And the first window was the transparent window. And it was what I could see about me. I can see this is me, and you could see about me. It was like we're all on the same page here. It's the things you can see that you know about me and things I know about me. It's a clear, two-way, transparent window. The second window is a window of things I can see about me, but I have the reflective tint on the other side. You can't. I keep it shielded. It's the double life stuff. It's the stuff I know about me, but I keep shielded and hidden from you. And some of us, we start to clean that window off. And so people can start to see us in sobriety. The third window is more mysterious. It's the things that you can see about me, but I can't. The reflective stuff's on the inside. You can see it. I can't. We get a lot of that in AA. How many times you go to meetings and you hear people sharing about themselves and you go, oh my God, that's me. And you never knew it till that second. I needed you to clear the window for me. I needed you to show me me. I mean, you hear it. I mean, old timers can easily screw with newcomers because we know stuff about them they don't know. I mean, you can get some guy brand new, 3 weeks sober, just walk up to him, look him right now and go, you've been worrying about yourself a lot, haven't you? They'll go, oh! How do you know? Well, we know. You can see. You can tell by the look in the eyes. I mean, you know, because that you can see yourself in there. It's things you can see about me, but I can't see about me. And then the last part is more will be disclosed. It's the things I can't see about me, and you can't either. They're very well hidden. Some of these things don't pop up for 10 or 20 or 30 years. And we all have that experience where you're sober 10 years and all of a sudden you realize something that nobody's known about you and you didn't know about you and all of a sudden you know about it. It's like, oh my God, that's why I'm like that. And you never knew it until you knew it. You could not see what you can see. And I think Alcoholics Anonymous in God's time, and sometimes it takes a while, as we clean off these windows and we let the light in, and we let the light in. And we let the light out. And we let the light in. And we let the light out. Because as it comes in, it must go out. And what I find here, I give away. Because just for the joy of it. Let's break for dinner. We'll come back at 7 o'clock.